Welcome to Eight Sided Freaks. Today it is myself and Anthony here to break down some news. Usually we talk a lot about fights that just happened or fights that are coming up. But as most people know, this stretch of UFC fights, not the greatest stretch of UFC fights you will ever see. Actually, probably one of the worst stretches that we'll see in the coming years in the last past couple years. So not a great stretch for some of these UFC Apex cards, but thankfully we have a decent amount of news that's actually important that we can talk about. And at the end, if anyone is dying to hear our thoughts on next week's upcoming card, which is UFC Vegas 89, we're going to do a brief preview, very short, just a couple things that stand out to us on that card. And obviously, the content on the written side at vendettasportsmedia.com will be coming out per usual, the preview and the best bets. But like I said, we're going to focus on news, and we have a lot of news to talk about today. And we're going to start right off at the top. Some of the biggest news: UFC 301. We know pretty much the whole card for the event. And we have some big news at the top and in the co-main. At the top, we have Steve Erceg versus Alexandre Pantoja. Steve Erceg got the shot at flyweight. It was pretty well known that Pantoja was going to fight UFC 301. Did not know who. Anthony, what do you make of Erceg being the one to get the shot at the belt?
I thought it was surprising just because I think I was trying to check real quick. He was ranked pretty high in the rankings. Um, it says,
I believe he's 10th.
he's 10 right now. Yeah. So, that's kind of self-explanatory right there for this person ranked 10th in the division to get the title shot. Also, the people he's fought, I didn't think were necessarily the people that give you a title shot once you beat them. They weren't, no one in the top five or anything. Um, they're not some of the staple names that we've seen for the past couple of years, for interim championships or for title fights and stuff, or number one contender fights. So just overall, I was a bit surprised that they reached so far. But I mean, he has looked, good in his in his couple fights in the UFC. So.
Yeah, Erceg, 3 fights in the UFC, 3 wins. He got 2 of those were ranked wins. Most recent being Matt Schnell, knocked out Matt Schnell. Sounds great. Matt Schnell is famously not durable. I think all 7 of his losses in the UFC have been finishes. So that'll happen to Schnell. And he had good fights against Alessandro Costa and David Dvorak. Costa is a guy that I think will probably eventually be ranked. So I actually value that win. I don't know how much other people do, but I personally do. But like you said, Erceg is pretty far down there in the rankings. I don't think rankings necessarily mean everything, but it does kind of show who you've beat, right? You don't get, just put number 1 in the rankings for no reason. Usually that means you beat somebody to get there. And in all honesty, this division is kind of in a really bad spot. If UFC 301 was not in Brazil and Pantoja was not Brazilian, he wouldn't be defending on that card. So they're kind of well, we need a guy to fight Pantoja on this date. What do we have? And the options were not great. The other 2 real options were Brandon Royval and Mohamed Mokaev. And Royval said he tore his MCL and needed to recover from that, but he'd be able to fight at 301. But I'm not really interested in rushing someone with a hurt MCL to the title fight when, hey, you can fight 6 months after and not have that concern. So I'm not really mad he didn't get the shot. Mokaev's 23. I think he's still far away. So I don't love Erceg getting a title shot, but you could have gave me just about any name and I probably would have not loved it, to be honest.
Yeah, that's I think that's fair, especially when I don't know out of the what is it out of the top 5, there's 2 or 3 of them already coming off losses. So it is a tough situation. I think it was surprising to see them reach so far, but kind of like you were saying, I'm not not necessarily like mad at it or anything. And pairing it with the fact that if the card's in Brazil and stuff, so that would make sense too.
Mm-hmm.
But um, I don't know, Pantoja, it's himself. Like I don't think he does. He's not an elite fighter to me. Like like super obviously super well rounded. He's very good at his specific things that he does. Um, so I think like I don't know, it's tough. I think he's very beatable, but he continues to win. So I'm not like I'm trying to balance out saying he's still not like a complete, fighter, elite fighter, but he's obviously still very good and enough to be champ.
Yeah.
So, and I think Erstag, if anything, will be. I don't think it should be like a steamroll. Hopefully, it should be, competitive enough for the to warrant the title fight.
Yeah. And I'm also in the same spot as you. I'm Pantoja. I actually picked against him against Moreno and Royval
Yeah.
and was obviously on the wrong side of both of those. And then I picked Royval. And the way that I picked Royval was like, oh, if he gets taken down, he's going to scramble. He'll get up, has great cardio, going to throw a ton of volume. And then he went out there and did that same exact thing against Moreno. And I was like, oh, come on, man. That's what I thought was going to happen in the title fight.
Yeah. You should have done literally one fighter in there.
Yeah, and a couple other things I'll add, like this division has had some bad luck as well in terms of forming some number one contenders. You had Manel Kopp was supposed to fight Mateus Nicolau. I believe Kopp missed weight. That fight got scrapped, got rebooked. But obviously Kopp didn't win that fight and earn himself a title fight. Kopp was supposed to fight Kai Kara France in Australia last year. Kai Kara France pulled out. Kai Kara France, his fight before that, he fought Amir Albazi. That fight was like a blatant robbery and one of the worst decisions all of last year. So that could have been a spot where Amir Albazi earned a title fight, but instead now you have both guys kind of not in a position to fight for a title because one won a robbery and you don't want to throw him into the title fight. One is coming off a loss, can't throw him into a title fight. And then Albazi is supposed to fight Moreno in Mexico City. He gets hurt in that fight, which was supposed to be his number one contender fight. So that is the last thing I'll add on this division, that it had a lot of bad luck in terms of getting an actual contender, which doesn't help when you have to have Mokaev fight on 301. So that I'll add that as
well. The one thing too wasn't because like I do remember Kai Kara France got robbed. I can't believe he still hasn't fought yet. Like, why let that sit on your record and let that be your last fight? Because didn't one time a couple years ago, I can't remember if it was like Sanhagen or TJ Dillashaw or someone. Didn't someone get like blatantly robbed and he just said like, "Oh, I don't care. We'll pretend like he won the fight," and like still gave him maybe not a title fight right after, but another big fight.
Oh, so the two I can think of were Yoel Romero versus Paulo Costa. They gave Costa got hurt and couldn't fight Izzy, so they just gave it to Romero because it was like a number one contender fight, and it was super close. People thought Romero won, so they were like, "Well, you're kind of 1-2 in terms of the contenders. Your fight showed that, so we'll throw Romero in there since Paulo's hurt." And people wanted to see Izzy versus Romero at the time for various reasons. That fight obviously sucked, but and then the other one, Aldo.
Okay, I was gonna start. Was it Aldo?
Aldo against Marlon Moraes. Marlon Moraes won. A lot of people thought Aldo won. And I don't remember what Aldo did after that, but like his next fight was definitely a step up. I don't remember if it was a number one contender or that they might have booked him for the title fight that fell through because they booked him to fight Cejudo, I believe. That fell through because of COVID. So that might have been another spot as well where a guy was coming off a loss. Those are the two that stick out to me.
I was going to say for Kai Kara France, he could, because I do remember Dana at first I thought was kind of supportive of the fact that France won that. So I don't know, like I think France should just fight one more, get a win on his record, and then you can play it off as like, 2-fight win streak, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there because I thought the Kopp fight made the most sense. They book it. Kai Kara France pulls out. I don't know if he's still hurt, but like that's like that to me, that was a fight that always should have been made. When that fight fell through, I wanted them to put that on 300. Like to me, that was like the most obvious fight booking of all time, Kopp versus France, and it would have been a great fight, but we did not get that. Maybe we'll get it soon. I think that's a really good fight.
Because they haven't fought since June 3rd.
Hmm. Yeah, it's been a while for him. All right. Also on 301, and this is arguably bigger news, depending on who you ask. I'm sure people have different opinions, but for any really hard, I don't want to say hardcore fan, but someone who's been watching the sport for more than 2 years, there's a large population of people that don't quite understand how good Jose Aldo was in his prime. But to anyone that, really, I'm not trying to say that as like a snob either, but like there's a lot of people that disrespect Jose Aldo, but there's also another um, population that really respects Jose Aldo, and he's coming back to the UFC 301. I assume it's the co-main event. It's Jose Aldo in Brazil, in Rio. So I imagine he's the co-main event against Jonathan Martinez. What do you make of Aldo coming back, and what do you make of his matchup being Jonathan Martinez?
Yeah, I'm there with you. I think Aldo is. I think he's one of the goats. A truly amazing fighter that doesn't get enough respect. I think because as the UFC was growing, a lot of people's first introduction was that 13-second knockout, and then following that, he's just an old man a little bit at that point. So he had lost a couple, and then even tried to switch weight classes and stuff. So I'm a huge fan. I think he's one of the most talented, skilled fighters of all time. Um, Incredible takedown defense. Even Marab, who everyone's scared of, I think shot 0 for 13 against him, and that was like a 40-year-old Aldo, or like maybe not 40, but super old Aldo at elevation, and still, didn't couldn't get land a single one. And then obviously the kicks and the defense, but so yeah, I'm super excited. I'm always there for an Aldo fight. Uh, Martinez, I think, could be a little tough. It's kind of a tough fight to come back on after retirement, so that's what I'd be worried. But overall, at least first reaction, that should that's a fun fight. I'd be there for it. So because I think Martinez himself is pretty skilled too, and does certain things striking wise, whether that be his kicks. Right, he was did he have the finish against Giannis leg kicks, or am I? That
Hmm.
was him, yeah. So I mean, obviously, it shows he has great, some good leg kicks, and or just striking with his kicks in general, not even specifically legs, but that's gonna be tough to hit Aldo, but I'm there for it. I'd like to see that cat and mouse game.
Yeah. Um, and like you said, like although I mean, a lot of people's introduction to him was the knockout in 13 seconds, and it is a shame because like prior to that, he hadn't lost in 7 years. I mean, like what he did in his prime, and I don't know if this is a hot take at this point, but I still kind of lean towards Aldo being the featherweight goat. I know a lot of people like to say Volkanovski, and I don't really like to argue it because I think it's close. But I still kind of lean Aldo because he did have more defenses, and that's a whole nother argument. But like the fact that that's even a discussion, I think is speaks a lot to who Aldo is and who Volkanovski is. But a lot of people who watched the reign of Volkanovski didn't get to see the reign of Aldo. Um, and also, he was the best featherweight in the world before the UFC even had the featherweight weight class. That's how like long he's been doing this. He's one of the best in terms of longevity in the history of the sport. Like there's few guys that have been able to be as good as Aldo for as long as Aldo. Even like he was fighting in title fights past his prime. Like I'd argue when he was fighting Max Holloway, he was past his prime, and he fought him in two title fights. Um, and I think that is about as big of a compliment as you can give someone. Hey, you're not in your prime, but you're out here fighting for titles. Like that's ridiculous. And then he drops the division, and he's going out there with some of the best bantamweights on the planet. Like you said, they gave him Marab. Marab doesn't take him down once. We just saw what Marab did to an Olympic gold medalist wrestler. He
Mhm.
took Henry Cejudo down. So it says a lot about who Aldo is as a fighter. And this specific matchup, it's like the OG elite leg kicker versus the new school elite leg kicker. Aldo doesn't kick them legs as much as he did in his prime, but like once every 3 months, you're scrolling through Twitter and you'll see the picture of what he did to Uriah Faber's leg in the WEC with leg kicks, and he was a force back then. And more recently, he's been the best at defending leg kicks. Like when he left the UFC, he was one of the best at defending leg kicks and not getting chopped down at the legs. So, I mean, just that in itself makes for an intriguing matchup. And then when you add some other elements of the striking, it only gets more intriguing as well because Aldo is one of, the most exciting, one of the best strikers the UFC's ever seen. So this is a top 5 fighter of all time coming back, and he still looks to be pretty good based on his last UFC performance. So I can't help but be extremely, extremely excited.
Yeah, I think too, like you said, that I don't know. I'm actually I do kind of lean him too. I don't really declare featherweight goat. So, but because I do think of all those like he's just so skilled, and it's something that I enjoy watching. Uh, as someone like for like when it comes to football and basketball and baseball, I know a lot of the ins and outs. But truly, like, and when you watch someone break down like the things that Aldo does, and it's just like totally goes over my head in real time when I'm watching the fights, and like I need to be slowed down to see like how special he is. So I mean, obviously, I'm worried about the age, 37, and I'm worried about a worst case scenario like KO loss in Brazil would be pretty bad. But I've never wanted to bet against Aldo, so I'll be there. I'll be excited for that fight.
Yep, I'm with you. And a couple other things I'll add is there's well, I guess this hasn't been like made official, obviously, but there were a lot of reports that Dominic Cruz was actually the guy that they wanted this to be against. They wanted Aldo versus Cruz, and that makes sense. But Cruz declined the fight. I believe he's was something to do with the weight cut, or it was also a report, so you don't really know how true that is. But sounds like the UFC wanted this to be Cruz versus Aldo, so um, do want to throw that out there as well because I know a lot of people were very confused that Aldo was not the original matchup because he's kind of the one guy in that division that's a little bit older that those two I don't think have fought off the top of my head unless I don't even think they fought back in WEC ages ago. So those two have never fought, and they're from the same generation. I know that's a fight a lot of people wanted. Pedro Munhoz, although already fought him, so that kind of leaves Cruz as the one guy. So I do want to add that as well because a lot of people, I think, were confused about that.
Yeah, well, I know they've been trying to make that fight before Aldo retired like a couple times, but he was so close in the Cruz had lost to like Cheeto or something, and
Mm-hmm.
then and Aldo was just so close to the title. Like I think if he beats Marab, then he was fighting for the next title. So it's tough to put them together when we're not quite at the same fighting in a
Mm-hmm.
little two spots different. I would say one was fighting for number one contendership, the other one was fighting to win, to fight again to be the number one contender maybe. But
Yeah.
the last thing I was gonna say too was looking at Jonathan for him though, if he beats him, like what another great name on the record. And putting together a very nice run right now. For like if he wins this, I think his next fight should be in the top 5.
Yeah. And like Martinez, like he's a great example. I feel like I say this all the time, but this division is so good that like this rankings 10 through 15 is Umar Nurmagomedov, Kyler Phillips, Dominic Cruz, Mario Bautista, Jonathan Martinez, and then Ricky Simone, Pedro Munoz tied at 15. That is like absurd for 10 through 15 because Umar's really, really good. Kyler looked outstanding. Bautista's looked outstanding. Martinez is like racking up wins against legends, looking great. He even beat Saeed Nurmagomedov, who a lot of people thought was going to be at the top of that division. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
Ricky Simone has
And
been like the big prospect for ages. So, a lot of good names just in that division in general.
yeah, I guess like you said, like rankings don't mean everything. This is one where I could see even if someone was ranked 7th and they got offered the title fight, I wouldn't be mad if I look at that record and see how, the specific names that are
Mm-hmm.
on it.
Yeah, I'm with you. This is the one division that's like this division's just absolutely insane. Last thing I'll add is that USADA's gone, and I'm not saying Jose Aldo is going to be out there on PEDs. However, if he made that choice, it would be easier to get away with. And I don't think that many people would be opposed to seeing Jose Aldo go out there on a little bit of sauce, looking like the OG Jose Aldo. So I just want to throw that out there as well. Once again, not accusing anybody, but Ovin St. Preux had one of the best performances in ages in his last fight. Part of that is because he was fighting Kennedy and Chuchku, but he was also a 40-year-old post-USADA who went out there and landed the most significant strikes of his career. Not saying he was on anything, but we are starting to see a trend with some of these older fighters. Just want to throw that out there. No accusations, all allegedly.
Yeah, that's a fair point. It's tough. I think you probably should have something like USADA in place, but Jose Aldo, go do your thing. Do whatever you need to do.
If anyone does it and it's Jose Aldo and he gets away with it, I'm not gonna be that upset. All right. UFC 301. I do want to touch a little bit on the rest of this card, because there's been a lot of discussion online about this card being pretty bad. And that is pretty much full stop once they added Aldo to the card. So I don't think the card is terrible anymore. It's obviously not the best main event you will see. But I do want to shout out some of the other fights on this card that I think are kind of getting swept under the rug, because there are some very, very fun fights. I'll just list out the main card, and then I got one prelim that stands out. So we've got Paul Craig versus Kyle Boralho. Ranked fighters, Boralho, great prospect. Vitor Petrino versus Anthony Smith. Petrino, undefeated, has looked great, undefeated in the UFC. Anthony Smith, obviously, veteran.
Needs to go behind the desk. He might need to go behind the desk.
Vitor Petrino is a guy that can convince you to go behind the desk as well.
Yeah.
Michel Pereira versus Makhmud Mirdov. Pereira 2-0 with 2 first-round finishes since moving to 85. Has won like 7 fights in a row. And then the one prelim, there's actually several prelims between like interesting fighters that like pique my interest, but we've got Elves Brenner versus Maitabek Orobali. That fight is going to be an absolute banger. Orobali doesn't look like he was born in this century, but he is very, very good at fighting. And Elvis Brenner, I believe, is 2-0 in the UFC. Upset win over Guram Kutateladze. And then he absolutely murdered a dude in Brazil last time he fought with a check hook. I believe it was a check hook. So that's one prelim banger that stands out. So just I think a lot of people are kind of disrespecting this 301 card, and I don't think it's the best pay-per-view, but I think the level of these fights are going understated just because it's not 2 guys in the top 5 going out there and fighting.
Yeah, I was gonna say I can see it's just the name value for, especially when you build up 299 and 300, or I'm sorry, even 298 too. Just a good run of not only great fights but also huge names. And then with how much they've talked about 300 to be the card after, I guess it's it's gonna get the same level of backing and support from the UFC, I would say. So I think maybe a card more for the fight fans rather than for how wide reach they were trying to get and milk Deshaun, to increase the fan base from maybe non-fight fans. That's all it is, I think. But I mean, yeah, there's a good amount of fights on there that I'm excited for. So also that Costa that you said, was that the same Costa, right?
Yeah. Yep. He's on there. Alessandro Costa versus Kevin Borjas. Borjas, a guy I liked on Contenders, and they have not done him any favors with Josh Vane and Alessandro Costa being his first 2 fights. But yeah, that's a good fight as well. Joe Anderson, Brito, Jack Shore. Brito is
Jack Shore.
An exciting guy. Jack Shore's look good. So like a lot of names on here that are at least piquing interest or have like some level of like this is a good prospect. And they also like all Brazilian. They didn't like go out there and like add 2 non-Brazilians just to like make a good fight. Every single fighter has one Brazilian in it. So like they did hold that end up as well.
Yeah.
And there's also a world where like Pereira looks good. Vitor Petrino looks good. Kyle Baraja looks good, and all of a sudden you have like 3 really exciting prospects who just beat good fighters. So it's like there's worlds where like after this card ages a lot better than it is right now. Which
like a coming out party for a lot of them. That is true. That's the thing too. With I guess specific country cards is for dumb Americans. I feel like it's we'll never probably truly appreciate it as much as like we could. But that's the other thing. It could have the aura of that. I always think of that O2 card from last year in England and how the people from England kept winning and stuff, and then the vibes were like super super high in there. So could always get where you kind of feel it. You think you can feel the atmosphere from the couch or from the TV. So it always has a chance for that too.
I'm pretty confident it's going to be insane when Aldo walks out.
Yeah,
that
I'll be
walkout's
standing
going
up
to
there.
be insane. Yeah, and I feel like I've said last thing I'll add like 1,000 times today. But then something else comes up in my mind. This was also supposed to be Pereira versus Jamal Hill, and then the UFC 300 they asked 50 dudes to headline that, and they all said no, or at least one half of the fight said no to headline 300. So then they had to burn the 301 headliner on 300. So like that did hurt this card as well, because if you have this same exact card and then you put Pereira and Jamal Hill at the top
and just bump them down one, then in Pantoja for a second, like or
in the co-main. It's like that card would automatically be ridiculous, and a lot of people don't like the UFC 300 main event. The UFC were not the people that were declining fights. Was the fighters. So
as
much as I'd like to side with the fighters, they did say no.
Yeah, Pereira is I've heard that same thing too. Is people were a little, which I understand it, but I think Pereira is one of the most exciting fighters in the UFC. And I'm I just look at it like that. Sure, think there's one other person that I'll always be there for those fights and always have a certain level of excitement compared to just a good fight, championship fight, obviously. But as you said, the other thing is Pereira might be able to win in the first round, and then you just put him again, just move him over, and he'll fight again.
No. I hate to break it to everybody. He may have a sweet dream on his hands at UFC 300. We're gonna have to wait and see. Let's not count on it.
Yeah, I know you're a big fan. I was gonna say, I was just trying to squeak out another fight if I could.
To be fair, like as much as I'll be rooting for Jamal Hill to win that fight and think he's going to win, if Pereira wins and then fights at 301, like I'm not gonna hate on a dude for being legendary. Like that's legendary right there. Like I can't hate on a dude for being a legend.
Yeah.
Yeah, but 301 I don't think is as bad as people are making it out to be. And Paulo Costa said, hey guys, contract signed. So maybe they add Paulo Costa. I also do not believe Paulo Costa when he speaks. So
at all.
50-50 on Mr. Paulo being added to the card.
That was the other guy, or one of the other guys. Paulo Costa always has amazing fights, and super exciting. Like anytime I can see him matched up against like mostly any name, and I'm like, yeah, that's probably gonna be fun.
Exactly. So hopefully he gets on the card as well. Then all of a sudden we've got a pretty good pay-per-view on our hands. All right. Switching gears out of UFC 301. This is obviously smaller news, but it does kind of affect the upcoming schedule. And it is, a fight card that maybe we talk about, maybe we don't. We're going to have to wait and see when the time comes. But Marvin Vettori pulled out of his fight with Brendan Allen. Chris Curtis steps in. I believe that is UFC Vegas 90. I lose track with some of these UFC Vegas cards because we've got a lot of them. But that is the fight card before UFC 300. What do you make of Chris Curtis being the one to step in? What do you make of this as a headliner compared to the previous fight that we originally had?
I think what is that? I mean, it's fine. You have to, they have to do, things. They had to maneuver and stuff. I think obviously it was a headliner more for Vettori. I'd say in the sense of he might be the A side, even though it's very low A side a little bit, but I mean, I don't hate it. I think I'm actually like a Brendan Allen fan. I've been
Mhm.
for a while. Um, so I think this is a chance for him to, maybe grab some more attention, put another great performance out there as the main event this time.
Mhm.
So I think I'm not mad. I'm not the biggest fan of Chris Curtis uh, as a person too. No, I'm just kidding. But I know he's done some other things outside of the octagon. Um, but I think he's been up there before. He's been in the middle of the rankings, won some, lost some. So overall, it's just this is just like a pure middleweight out of the top five fight.
Yeah. I was not happy with this news, and obviously respected Chris Curtis for stepping in. Like, it's not that it's not even against Chris Curtis, but like Brendan Allen is a guy who's very good and is like the idea of him headlining against Vittori kind of gives more. I don't want to say validity to his skills, but like you said, Vittori's probably the A side just in terms of name value. I mean, he's fought Izzy twice, so it means he headlined a paper, and one of those was a pay-per-view headliner. Even if people don't love him, I think people have at least somewhat respect for his skills or at least his name value. So I think a win
Mhm.
over Vittori like goes out there, and it's also like for the other guys in that division, like if you're a top five guy in that division and you're offered Brendan Allen, he's coming off a win over Vittori, maybe you're more inclined to take that fight than, if he's coming off a win over Chris Curtis, maybe you're like, oh, well, I don't want to fight a guy who's, just purely looking
Still
at his
fighting
resume.
14.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So like that, I think is something that like really sucks about this. When it was previously an opportunity for him to take a step forward. I will say he did lose to Chris Curtis. Before he was ranked, both guys were still relatively unknown. So it is kind of a tough matchup because Curtis does have good takedown defense, and if Curtis gets aggressive with his hands, he rips to the body. You know, fairly good boxing. I wouldn't say he's an elite boxer, but like he can go out there and box, and he's hard to hit. So like Chris Curtis does some things very well that kind of make this a tougher matchup. Um, Honestly, I think this is like a harder fight than Vittori. Not that Curtis is better than Vittori, but Vittori is an easier like stylistic matchup than a guy with good takedown defense that can box. I think he was probably the better grappler in pure grappling than Vittori, but doesn't mean he can't take Chris Curtis down because we've seen Brendan Allen do good things. So, um, I'm not exactly thrilled about this news, but I will say, obviously, any fighter who steps up on short notice, thank you, because if this wasn't the fight, then you're going further down the rankings. You're getting into unranked guys. Maybe they can't even find an opponent. And the co-main event is currently Norma Dumont and Jermaine Durandamy. So I wouldn't have wanted that to become a main
Yeah.
event at all. So
Oh, the UFC was a second away from putting that up for the main event.
I didn't know Jermaine Durandamy was still an active fighter when I learned that fight got booked. I was like,
Yeah,
what
you
in the hell?
you just said that name, and I was like, oh, I haven't heard of that in so long.
Yeah. So that's not even a great. That's a really bad card. Might be the worst of like the bad cards that we're currently going through right now. So that's
We got a
that's
trend going.
yeah.
Everything's the worst until the next one. UFC's really on a heater.
Yes.
They're
Yeah.
trying their
So
hardest.
they're trying their absolute hardest with Norma Dumont and Jermaine Durandamy. So yeah. Those are my thoughts on that. Nothing groundbreaking there, but low key very impactful for that division.
Yeah. So yeah, I agreed. With it might be a good way for him or Brennan at least like a silver lining is can like wipe the slate clean, get your win back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Which in a sense, obviously, it doesn't make you undefeated like Sean, although he is still undefeated. But if you get your loss back, it's not like you. I feel like people can't hold that fight against you anymore. If we were like
Mm-hmm.
getting to compare like legacies down the road or something like
Yep.
that. And
Or like
but
title fights as well. If you're like trying to earn a title fight and someone says, "Oh, you lost to Chris Curtis," then you can say, "Ah, well, I beat him 2 years later."
yeah,
So,
exactly. The more recently, and then so the other thing with Vittori is I agree 100%. For maybe for other people or most people, he Allen deserved a shot to get a bigger name, a bigger middleweight name, I should say, on his record.
Hmm.
So, and while I don't think Vittori is, top tier, I do think people look at his name still with, like you said, validity. I think people still look at his name and respect it.
Hmm. Yep. Um, Brendan Allen has proven to be pretty good on the mic. And his two losses in the UFC are to Chris Curtis and Sean Strickland, who are teammates. I wonder if he beats Chris Curtis, he gets on the mic and, asks for a redemption tour. I just got over on Chris Curtis. Now the only other guy to beat me in the UFC is Sean Strickland. Give me that one back. Maybe that's the route he goes. So maybe there's a silver lining in here for him that he can make that call out, and kind of a compelling storyline there for a call out.
I would be that for that. Yeah, so he loses those two, and then gets it back on the way to a title. Like literally fixes
Hmm.
like his losses. Like yeah, I'm there for that.
Like that would actually be fun too. Like a
And I'm
little bit
sure
of story and drama in a
mhm,
middleweight division that some of these guys don't say much.
exactly. And I'm sure if he, gets on the mic the right way and just pokes at Sean, and Sean will do the rest if he's like, if he gets all in his feelings.
Yeah.
Although, yeah, I just saw a video of Sean crying in a car, and a big, huge supporter for mental health. Love that. But the quote tweet was, for someone that makes fun of other people's for being so vulnerable and open, he continually does it with a camera on him. I don't get
Yeah.
it.
And he said some things about Khalil Roundtree when Khalil Roundtree was being an advocate for mental health, and
Hmm.
Sean said some negative things back. I don't remember off the top of my head exactly what he said. And I think those things YouTube would probably not approve if I even copied his
Yeah.
quotes about what he said. So, um, Sean Strickland has been out here giving it to people. So, and I think for people that have listened extensively or read extensively, I don't really like Sean Strickland. Not even from like even outside of like the cage. I think he's really, really overrated in the cage as well. So
Yes.
it
I can't. I'm
I'd pick
praying to.
Brendan Allen to beat him.
Yeah. I'm hoping. I'm hoping a Robert Whitaker uh, matchup, and then maybe a Robert Whitaker title fight.
Yeah, I'm with you. I would not hate that at all. All right. Moving on. This was news that happened, um, I think last week or 2 weeks ago. But it is still, I think, pretty important to talk about. And we didn't talk about it last week because we were breaking down UFC 2, or we were recapping UFC 299. And that took a little bit of precedence, and that card was so good. It took quite a bit of time as well. The Ultimate Fighter, I don't remember the season off the top of my head. I want to say 32. Coaches were announced: Valentina Shevchenko, Alexa Grasso. They have fought twice. First one, Grasso rear naked choke comeback, and that was to end Valentina Shevchenko's title reign. Rematch UFC Noche last year. Main event title fight for a fight night. Far cry from Brendan Allen and Chris Curtis and Nama Yunus and Hebas and Tuivasa and Tybura, but that's besides the point. In that fight, we had a draw with some controversial scoring. Um, Now we've got the Ultimate Fighter. What do you make of these two being the names and the coaches for the Ultimate Fighter?
Um, I don't know. Like it's tough because I don't think there's ever necessarily. I'd have to go through the list, but it is what it is. They can only put together so many coaches or whatever, so it's fine. And I think sometimes the UFC overhypes coaches as like that is the selling point in a way, but I would say the ones where they're truly like a McGregor, Uriah, or specifically some of the older ones too, where they really had beef and stuff like that. That doesn't happen too much anymore, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole point of the coaches being the biggest selling point is a little bit. It's lost its value a little bit. So I think in general, these are two good coaches, two ways to just see them more. So I think if Grasso, is going to be champion, maybe if she wins this fight, or Valentina, who's already been champion for so long, it's a good way to maybe get more behind the scenes to see what makes her tick and why she's been so great. Um, So I'm there for it, but obviously, like it's not. They just recently we're doing McGregor Chandler, so that's a big drop off in star power, but
Yeah.
overall, still excited.
Yeah. And like you said about kind of like the downfall of the coach versus coach or that part of the storyline, I feel like the way that it's edited, it's so little focus on the coaches. Like the way that those episodes are edited, like it came like McGregor Chandler, there was a little bit more focus on McGregor and Chandler, but it was McGregor and Chandler, so you didn't really have a choice. But it still
Hmm.
like wasn't as focused around those two guys as much as you'd maybe like. Um, and part of the reason the original Ultimate Fighter was so fun is because it was a little bit out there. Like some of these dudes were insane. Now
Yeah.
these people get in the house and they're like, all right, it's business. I'm working. I'm not going to cause problems, which is the right mindset to have. I'm going to go out there, win, no drama in the house, all this. I'm not drinking. Like, it's the right mindset, but it's not great TV. There's a difference. Um, like back in the day when you had like Nate Diaz and they were doing pranks and Nate would get pissed, like, guys don't do that anymore. Or like some of the most famous moments from Tough where like dudes getting absolutely hammered in the house and then getting into arguments or something like that just
Yeah.
doesn't really happen anymore. And like I said, for the athletes, I don't blame you at all. Like that's the correct approach. TV approach doesn't necessarily follow suit. So I think there's been a downfall in the Ultimate Fighter, but and right, a lot of it is like, oh, here's a video package for 5 to 10 minutes about what my life like
Yeah.
was back home, and I'm like, man, dude, I don't need to see you and your wife cooking dinner with all due respect. Like it doesn't really it's not
Hmm.
like thrilling TV. So um but as far as like these two coaches, I think there could be some beef here.
I
Like
was just thinking, like, if some people are like, oh, this is where I live, I'm cooking dinner. And it's like, don't worry, once you get that 10 and 10 contract from them, you're going to be in the same spot.
yeah, that is true. But like, man, like maybe we get some beef here because Valentina was kind of salty a little bit in those two
Hmm.
like losses or drawing a loss. Like she thought she was like the way better fighter the first time. And the second time she thought she won, even though like that fight, like I know they screwed her with the 10-8 in round 5, but round 4 was like the most 50-50 round of all time. One girl won 2 rounds, one girl won 2 rounds, and there was like the most obvious 50-50 round I've ever seen of like I have no clue who won that round. So like it's really hard to be like, oh my god, I should have won when you won 2.5 rounds. That's half the fight draw. So
I
maybe that creates some beef between the two.
Yeah, I do remember she went on a little press tour afterwards of complaining in a sense, or I guess, but yeah, but being salty over the decision.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's a great point. It was the old Tough was definitely more reality TV, like real world. It felt like all or the challenge, like it felt like all those like fun shows, in
Mm-hmm.
a sense with the outside the octagon. But then now, especially what they did that last season was like veterans. Was it veterans versus rookies, like ex UFC
That was an
fighters?
awful idea.
Because
Yeah, it was veterans versus rookies, and a lot of the veterans were actually I think maybe all of them were ex UFC guys. I think all of them were.
I think just yeah, all of
Yeah,
them were. Um,
and it was a
and that
wash,
yeah,
absolute wash, terrible idea.
especially to I guess it's just up to the UFC if they're like I don't mind truly going for the fighting and learning about the fighters and seeing training and stuff. But if people are like, especially if you were some people are maybe watching that for the drama and stuff. Well, having veteran fighters that really want to get back in the UFC, they're not going to be doing like anything
Hmm.
other than like you said, focusing on their business.
Yeah.
So, did that's it is what it is with that. Do you think or what are the weight classes? Are they doing too? Did they come out with that yet? Or
Yeah, they came out with the contestants and the weight classes. I want to say I
okay,
know one. I believe one of them was featherweight. I think it was featherweight and middleweight.
uh,
Because I wrote the post and my takeaway was like two good divisions because featherweight can give you good TV. Like, got outside the UFC featherweights, like you can find good featherweights and make good fights. You need middleweights, so like there's a
yeah,
good balance there between like good TV and like okay, we need more middleweights. We need more talented middleweights. So that's like a fairly good like dichotomy between the two. So I was actually happy with the weight classes, but yeah.
I was just thinking too of like what UFC current weight class would I want to see a tough of where you make all of them like go in the house, and middleweight might be my pick. I was just thinking like
Some of
um
those guys are crazy.
oh god, seeing Izzy, and I feel like Rob would be cool to get a beer with. Jared seems pretty chill, but like
Yeah.
Marvin Vittori and stuff, Costa.
The Marvin Vittori and Izzy arguments and Driscus
And,
Duplessis in there would be
exactly.
hilarious. Marvin
You just
still
have
thinks he'd
Sean
beat Izzy
Strickland
twice.
too. Really? Yeah.
Yeah,
He's
that
like
would be
no, but
something special.
I held him up against the cage like a couple times that I really thought I won.
And then Sean would be doing the same thing with just Drickus. Oh
Yeah,
man, that would
that'd be
be
a fun one.
something. That was a good call by you. That would be insane. Other part I forgot to touch on is I'm pretty sure this means they're going to fight at UFC 306 at the Sphere.
Hmm.
Like, I think that timeline's pretty good because I don't think it's any secret that, well, it's not a secret at all that UFC 306 is going to be the Mexican Independence Day show at the Sphere in Las Vegas. Worst kept secret was that they want Grasso on that card. So this is a
Yeah,
pretty good way to, you know, not make it seem like you're just kicking the can down the road blatantly to book that fight at UFC 306. This is like, all right, well, we get a couple months build up to a fight that's going to happen at a show that we are really, really, we really want to be a good show. They want that show to be great. So you're going to have the Ultimate Fighter coaches on there, I think is a good way to do that, a good way to keep them busy until September. So I actually think logistically, this made a ton of sense, even if it's not like drama. It's not like, they could have done Izzy and Dreykus and got the most drama filled show of all time. But this logistically actually helped them more than any other booking could have.
yeah,
So,
because we had touched on that the just bad timing with there's all the Mexican champs. I think there was three last year at one point, and they kind of all had fallen, and just didn't work out with the top contenders and stuff. So they obviously had to do something though.
yeah. Like there's a world where Moreno beats Royval, gets the belt back against Pantoja. Then you got Royval, Moreno. You can use it the Sphere. So I don't know who's the main event of that is going to be, but I do really think they want Grasso on that card. Sean and Marab are both really angling for that, and maybe that's the direction they go. But it's tough to say.
Have you seen Sugar Sean's Mexican? So have you seen that where he's like, I'm Mexican? Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, and I get it a little bit. He said my daughter's Mexican, so I'm Mexican. That's how genetics work.
He pulled you can see the elements of Chael Sonnen in Sean, where you just say something blatantly untrue and say it like it's a fact, and then it's
say it in a certain way where you're like, dude, I kind of see it.
Yeah, it's like when Chael said, I thought if you tapped it, ended the round. I didn't think I was gonna lose. Like, obviously that's not true, but it is hilarious.
I thought I lost one round. It's still 4-1.
Yeah, he thought he was getting the belt that night. But yeah, like maybe they take that angle with it just because. And Marab, had the flag in Mexico, or he had the flag at the press conference and went to the Mexico City card, kind of embraced the Mexican side of that after like he was fighting Henry, and Henry like famously said, you'll never see me with the Mexican flag. So Marab went out there with the Mexican flag. So maybe that's enough guys like appealing to the Mexican crowd that they make that fight, but I'm not going to pretend it's a good option.
Yeah.
There's no good option there. All right. Last thing we're going to touch on is this week's upcoming card. And, we've talked about this, or hinted at it or joked about it. The card's just not great. It's just not great. So we're not going to do like a full fight card breakdown. Main event, we've got Rose Namajunas and Amanda Ribas. Those are the two big names. I still don't really think that's a great fight. Actually, like I'm not like, oh my God, I really want to see this fight because those are both strawweights fighting at bantamweight, and I want to see how they look against other flyweights if they're going to stay in the division. So booking them against one another doesn't really like make me excited. Like if it's just not a fight that really interests me, but there are some prospects on this card, so we can at least touch on it. What are some names or a fight that stands out to you on this card?
I was trying to look. I saw.
I can go first because I have a couple while you look.
Okay, because I
Um,
know I got one.
Yeah. So, like, not even joking, a lot of these guys are like very unknown fighters. A lot of the guys are making their UFC debut. Um, I do a lot of work on Contender Series, watch all the Contender Series fights, ranked all the Contender Series guys. We've talked about this before on the show. So there's quite a few Contender Series guys, so that always piques my interest. I know other people don't care. But for the Contender Series guys, we have Andre Lima versus Igor Da Silva. Um, Andre Lima was in my top tier of prospects. Um, I believe he was like around the 6 or 7 or 8 mark. When I ranked them out like 1 through 50, that's how many guys got contract, like 50. But he was someone I, thought looked good, deserved a contract. Igor Da Silva was a little bit more in the middle road, but I was also impressed with him. Don't think he's a bum by any means. So that's a good matchup, and two decent prospects, both undefeated in the featherweight division. I think Lima's like 20, so that's one to watch out for. Um, and then we have on the main card Luis Pajuelo, not saying that correctly, versus Fernando Padilla. Um, Pajuelo, I mean, this guy is like entertainment. Like, I'm going to stand in your face. I'm going to maybe get hit, but I'm going to hit you 10 times more, and I'm going to dig to the body. Got to finish on Contender Series with the knee to the body of a grounded opponent. Like, he beat the crap out of that dude. Very exciting fighter. Another guy I really liked, he was in my top 10. Don't think he has as much upside, but he is a guy that's pretty high floor for a featherweight division, and will probably be one of these guys at featherweight that's very, very exciting. Last one, Peyton Talbot, Cameron Simon, two elite prospects here. Talbot, another guy I really liked inside the top 10 on Contender Series, won one fight in the UFC. Winner of this is going to be a very, very highly touted prospect. Two guys, 25 and 23, with Talbot being the older one. So lots of youth here and lots of skills for their age. So very impressed with those two. So those are the three Contender Series fights that I'm selfishly interested in because I do quite a bit breaking that down and projecting. So I'm always interested in those fights.
Yeah, I think quick when I was looking, speaking of that one season, I saw Kurt Hollowball's on here, and I'm pretty sure he was on
Mm-hmm.
the McGregor, so that was funny. But the two I'll give would just be Billy Q, kind of like yours. I think he's super entertaining in most fights. Usually, um, yeah, usually has a good showing on him. Gets been knocked out. Did he got murdered by someone
Barbosa.
on a knee, I think, right?
Yes.
But for
I
the
was
most
I
part,
was I was there. I saw that one live. We
oh
were
really?
we were there, and yeah, we had bets on Barbosa. We were rooting for Barbosa, and Barbosa absolutely slaughtered him. I like Billy
Uh-huh.
Q, but
Exactly.
that was a tough look for him.
That was a tough one, but I think he's a good fighter. And then he has a handful of knockouts on his own
Mhm.
too, so should
Pushes
be
an
good.
insane pace. Like, he
Hmm.
throws a bunch of strikes. So he's another one of those guys at featherweight. Maybe he's not going to be a top 15, top 5 championship contender, but he's going to be entertaining.
Hmm. And then that's funny that my last one was the Peyton Talbot. I know for different reasons. I just knew he had a good record. I didn't think I watched him on the Contender Series like you did, but I had known the name because he trains out of Reno.
Hmm.
And on campus at least, I don't know, there was actually like word got around that there was someone from Reno fighting in the UFC. So there was that reason why I checked him out, and then he won. He looked good. He got the submission, so I'm excited to see an actual second fight.
Hmm. Yeah, a little bit more on Peyton Talbot, like, or in this fight in general. I think this is the best fight on the card by a mile. Last week it was Isaac Dulgarian and Christian Rodriguez were just popped in the middle of the main card, and it's like, all right, this is the best fight on this card in terms of like matchmaking, future interests, like, and this week it's Talbot and Simon. Like, they're both very, very good. Talbot's looked great so far. I will say Nick Ajiri, he's not going to give you much of a fight. Cameron Simon will. So a lot tougher matchup, but I mean, I don't really care who wins this fight because the winner is going to be like, all right, respect. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like, the winner is going to come out of this in a pretty good spot. And to your point about Reno, I was doing some reading last night on Talbot, and he was the first fighter out of his gym in Reno to make it to the UFC. And sounds like a lot of people are viewing that as like a potential like up and coming gym that could produce some more UFC guys, especially since the UFC has grown a much larger presence in Nevada and Las Vegas as a whole. So a lot of people are liking that gym. I don't know anything about any of the other fighters. I didn't look that much into it. But there are at least people who are like, hey, this gym is one to watch out for.
I was just gonna say it would make sense too because it's probably a really good market considering what they've already done in Vegas. I guess you would never choose that over Reno over Vegas, but to at least in the same state, you could, it's Reno's built similarly with the casinos and sports betting and stuff. I feel like it's an easy market to establish yourself in and even take advantage of in the same way.
And there's only so many gyms in Vegas too. Like I know they have Extreme Couture. I think maybe Syndicate. I'm not great at knowing gym locations, to be honest, outside of like, Izzy's gym is in, Australia,
I know where Team Alpha Males is.
Yeah, like some of the real famous ones. I'm not great at knowing like where Syndicate is, where's Goat Shed. I'm not great at knowing where all these gyms are. But I think there's Extreme Couture, and I think at least one other one in Vegas. And like, there's only so many divisions. You can only have so many UFC fighters from a singular division in one gym. Like, you don't want there's gyms that have too many lightweights, frankly, and like they need to go train somewhere else so we don't have to worry about two lightweights training in the same gym that are going to fight each other. So it is good to have another gym in Nevada, period, even if it's not in Vegas, just because there's going to be so many fighters coming to Vegas that having another gym, very, very beneficial. And if you're fighting at the Apex, it's not like you're getting on a plane to get to Vegas.
Exactly.
At least I don't think so. I've never actually been there, so I don't think it's that far.
From Reno to Vegas?
Yeah.
It's actually surprisingly like it's like a 6 or 7 hour drive.
Oh. Well, maybe that busts my theory a little bit, but you're still
I'm saying within the context of actual distance, there's if you do need a plane, or for a plane ride, it's minimal. It's like probably 45 minutes to an hour then compared to West Coast to East Coast or anywhere else.
Yeah. Driving 7 hours and dodging the jet lag is still, that'd be nice.
Yeah.
You're not flying in from Josh Cooleybaugh flew in from Australia to Vegas. I can't imagine he felt too good in there when he was fighting.
Yeah.
Something to consider for a lot of these guys. All right. That's everything we had on the docket today. Just under an hour. Lots of news. Cross our fingers we've got more news for next week. I have a silly suspicion we won't. Got blessed today with some good news. News in general. Hopefully we have some news next week to break down because like we just talked about, like this upcoming card, not a great one. And next week's card actually is not as bad. Aaron Blanchfield and Manon Fior in the main event. That's a very, very important fight for that division. And there are a couple other notable names on that card, so maybe we can talk a little bit about that. We've got like Joaquin Buckley versus Vicente Luque.
He's buried on this card, but
yeah, that was a Luque was supposed to be the co-main, and then he was supposed to be the main with Sean Brady. Sean Brady got hurt, so I don't think they actually had the bout placement lined up. I assume Luque will be on the main card, and Chris Weidman as well, Jersey guy, coming back. Who knows what he's going to look like based on our discussion earlier. Maybe he looks surprisingly good. We'll have to wait and see. So there's actually some decent names on that card if we need to talk about those fights. So, but regardless, Vendetta Sports Media for all UFC articles and more in-depth thoughts on this week's card. The preview will be out on Friday, and make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. And thank you to everyone who stuck with us today, even though we did not have a stacked pay-per-view to break down.